Ever had a thought so random, so intrusive, that you wondered, where the hell did that come from? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Those thoughts aren't really yours. Neuroscience proves that brain activity spikes before you're even aware of a decision. So if you're not the one generating them, who is? The School for Gods calls it the tyrant within, the unseen force shaping your fears, doubts, and limits. And the worst part? You believe it's you. Right now, your mind is feeding you stories, telling you who you are, what's possible, what to fear. But what if that voice was never really yours? What if the real you existed before thinking? The moment you realize this, you stop being a slave to your thoughts. You gain the power to step back, observe, and finally take control. So, are you ready to find out who's really in charge of your mind? 1. Thoughts appear before you think them. Most people believe they're the authors of their thoughts, but science proves otherwise. Studies in neuroscience reveal that brain activity spikes before a person is even aware of making a decision. In other words, thinking happens before the thinker shows up. The School for Gods points out that this delay is where the tyrant within operates, feeding doubts, fears, and beliefs that feel like free will, but are really unconscious programs. The question isn't whether thoughts appear, but who or what is planting them in the first place. If thoughts simply arise, then where do they come from? The mind acts like a radio, picking up signals from a deeper field of awareness. Some signals empower, others imprison. A person who constantly thinks about failure isn't necessarily choosing to. He's tuned into a frequency of limitation. But the real identity of a man is not his thinking. And this is where power begins. Once he realizes he's not obligated to believe every thought that crosses his mind, he can start choosing which ones to entertain. Imagine waking up to a flood of negative thoughts. This day is going to be terrible. I'm not good enough. Nothing ever works out. Who decided this? Certainly not the conscious mind. The School for Gods teaches that most people function like puppets, reacting to thoughts as if they were personal truths. But the moment a man steps back and observes, instead of automatically accepting, he cracks the illusion of separation between himself and his thoughts. Here's a simple experiment. Take 5 minutes and just watch what appears in your mind. Don't judge, don't resist, just observe. Thoughts will come and go, yet something remains unchanged. That silent presence watching the thoughts, that's the real you, the one before thinking, beyond mind, untouched by the noise. And once a man taps into that awareness, he starts to notice something else. There's a force that doesn't want him to see this truth. 2. The tyrant within, who is controlling your mind. There's a voice inside every man's head, telling him what to fear, what to chase, and what to believe. But here's the real question. Who put it there? The School for Gods calls this the tyrant within, an invisible master that keeps men trapped in a prison of doubt and limitation. It whispers, you can't, you're not enough. Stay in your place. And like a dictator, it rules through fear, making a man believe these thoughts are his own. But what happens when he stops obeying? The mind is like a stage, and the tyrant is the loudest actor on it. It thrives on attention. Reacting to it gives it power. That's why worry never leads to solutions, only to more worry. A man who believes his fears without questioning them lives as a servant to a master he's never seen. But the moment he steps back and observes the voice, something shifts. The tyrant loses its grip because it's no longer controlling from the shadows. Awareness exposes it. Think of a time when you hesitated before taking action, maybe speaking up in a meeting, starting a business, or approaching someone new. That hesitation wasn't logic, it was the tyrant keeping you small. It convinces men to play safe, to choose comfort over growth. But growth requires rebellion. A simple practice? The next time hesitation creeps in, ask, who is speaking right now, me or the voice that wants me weak? That moment of awareness weakens the tyrant's chains. The School for Gods teaches that the tyrant only exists as long as a man follows its orders. Stop obeying and its power fades. But most men never dare to challenge it because they believe the voice is their own. That's the real trick. The question is, if that voice isn't truly you, then who are you? 3. You are the watcher, not the voice. If a man can hear a voice in his head, then who is listening? That question alone shatters the illusion that thoughts are his identity. The mind produces an endless stream of commentary, judgments, fears, desires, but none of it defines who he is. The School for Gods teaches that true power begins when a man shifts from being the puppet of his thoughts to the one observing them. He is not the thinking, he is the awareness behind it. And the moment he sees this, the chains start to break. The mind is like a storm, constantly moving, making noise, throwing distractions. But who is watching the storm? A man lost in thinking believes he is the storm itself, pushed and pulled by every gust of doubt and fear. The observer, however, stands untouched, watching the chaos but never being consumed by it. This simple shift in awareness is the difference between being ruled by the mind and ruling over it. And once he sees this, the mind loses its power to control him. Here's a practical test. Sit in silence for 1 minute and listen. Pay attention to every thought that pops up, what it says, how it feels, but don't engage. Just watch. A man will quickly realize thoughts appear without his permission, like visitors knocking on a door. But here's the key. He doesn't have to invite them in. He can simply notice them and let them go. The moment he understands this, he stops being a prisoner of thinking and starts becoming its master. But the mind is clever. It doesn't want to be watched. The moment awareness increases, it throws distractions, making a man believe he must keep thinking to stay in control. But is that really control, or just another trick? The School for Gods makes it clear. The more a man identifies with his thoughts, the more he becomes their slave. So what happens when he lets go of thinking altogether? 4. Mental noise, the illusion of control. The mind never stops talking because it doesn't want to be ignored. It fills every quiet moment with thinking, replaying the past, worrying about the future, analyzing meaningless details. Why? Because as long as a man is lost in thought, he's not in the present moment. And if he's not present, he can't see through the illusion. The School for Gods teaches that the mind's greatest trick is making a man believe he's in control, when in reality, he's just reacting to whatever thought appears next. Think about it. When was the last time you decided what to think? Thoughts seem to appear on their own, demanding attention, pulling a man into mental spirals. Yet, most men believe that thinking equals control. It doesn't. Real control comes from awareness, the ability to see thoughts without getting lost in them. A man who understands this stops being a victim of his mind's constant noise. He realizes that just because a thought appears doesn't mean it deserves his attention. Here's an experiment. Next time the mind starts racing with worries, take a deep breath and shift focus to the present moment. Look around, feel the body, notice the sounds in the room. This simple act of awareness interrupts the mind's grip, proving that thoughts only control a man when he believes they must be followed. The School for Gods teaches that freedom isn't found in controlling thoughts, it's found in stepping beyond them. But stepping beyond thinking is exactly what the mind resists. It will convince a man that if he stops thinking, everything will fall apart. That's the illusion. The truth is, real clarity and power only emerge when the noise fades. So what happens when a man finally realizes his thoughts are just background chatter, not reality itself? 5. Your mind is a prison, but you hold the key. The mind is the most elaborate prison ever built, and most men don't even realize they're trapped. The bars aren't made of steel, but of beliefs, deeply ingrained ideas about what's possible, what's not, and who they are. The School for Gods teaches that the tyrant within thrives on these limitations, keeping men small, predictable, and under control. But here's the truth. The door to this prison has never been locked. The key has always been in their hands. A man hears the same thoughts every day. You can't. You're not ready. It's too risky. And because they repeat so often, he assumes they must be true. But repetition isn't truth. It's just programming. The mind is like a looped recording, playing the same script over and over. The only way out? Stop believing the voice. A simple way to break the cycle is by challenging it. The next time the mind says, "You can't," a man must ask, "Who says?" That tiny moment of doubt weakens the entire system. Think of someone who broke free from limitation, an entrepreneur who built an empire, an athlete who defied the odds, a man who walked away from a life that didn't serve him. None of them waited for permission. They saw the prison for what it was, a trick of the mind, and walked out. The School for Gods teaches that the real identity of a man is beyond limitation. He isn't his thinking, his fears, or his past. He is awareness itself, and that awareness is already free. But the tyrant doesn't give up so easily. It fights to keep control, convincing a man that without its voice, he'll be lost. That's the final trick. Because the moment he stops seeking validation from thinking and starts trusting the silent presence within, something radical happens. He steps into real power. And when a man stands in his own power, what happens to the prison? 6. Thoughts shape reality, but only if you let them. Most men are stuck in a loop, thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same emotions, and reliving the same life over and over. Why? Because thoughts act like a lens, filtering how they see reality. The School for Gods teaches that while thoughts influence perception, they don't define it. A man trapped in negative thinking isn't doomed to a negative life, unless he believes he is. The key to breaking free isn't controlling thoughts, but realizing they have no power unless he gives it to them. Consider two men standing in the rain. One curses the storm, seeing it as an inconvenience. The other welcomes it, appreciating the fresh air, the sound, the moment itself. Same event, different realities, shaped entirely by thought. The mind tells a story about life, but that story isn't the truth. It's just a perspective. The moment a man questions his thinking, he gains the ability to reshape his entire experience. This is where real transformation begins. Here's an experiment. When a negative thought appears, don't resist it. Instead ask, is this fact or just an old habit? Most of the time, it's just a recycled belief, something picked up years ago that has never been questioned. The School for Gods teaches that thoughts are like suggestions, not commands. A man doesn't have to act on them. He can simply let them pass. And the more he does this, the more he realizes he isn't his mind. He is something greater. But the ego hates this realization. It wants to keep a man engaged, reacting, believing every thought as if it's law. Because once he stops identifying with his thinking, the illusion starts to collapse. And when the illusion collapses, what's left? 7. Breaking free, the art of letting go. The more a man fights his thoughts, the stronger they become. Resistance is fuel. It keeps the mind's grip tight. The School for Gods teaches that true mastery isn't about controlling thoughts, but about letting them pass, like clouds drifting across the sky. The moment a man stops trying to force his mind into silence and simply observes it, he steps into real power. Thinking is just noise. Awareness is the space that allows the noise to exist. Imagine holding a rope in a tug-of-war with the mind. Every doubt, every fear, every worry is pulling on the other side. The harder a man pulls back, the more tension he creates. But what happens if he simply lets go of the rope? The struggle ends instantly. The same applies to thoughts. When a man stops engaging with them, they lose their grip. He doesn't have to fight his mind. He just has to stop giving it his energy. Here's a practical way to do it. Next time an intrusive thought appears, instead of reacting, pause, take a breath. Watch it without judgment, without needing to fix or change it. The moment he stops feeding it with attention, it begins to fade on its own. The School for Gods teaches that mastery comes not from force, but from flow. When a man learns to let go, his mind becomes a tool, not a prison. But the ego doesn't want to be ignored. It will throw everything it has, doubts, distractions, even guilt, to keep a man hooked. It knows that the moment he stops taking thought so seriously, it loses its control. And once he stops fighting, he realizes something else. He was never really trapped. He was just lost in the noise. So where does real freedom exist? 8. The present moment is the escape route. A man can't be a prisoner of his mind if he's fully present. The moment he shifts his awareness to the now, the mental chatter fades into the background. The School for Gods teaches that the tyrant within only thrives in the past and the future. Regret and worry are its weapons. But in the present moment, those weapons disappear. The mind may still produce thoughts, but without a reaction, they become harmless. Think about a time when everything felt effortless, maybe during a deep conversation, playing a sport, or just watching a sunset. In those moments, there was no overthinking, no struggle, just pure presence. That's the state where real clarity exists. The problem? Most men are so addicted to thinking that they don't even realize they're missing life as it happens. Their minds are trapped in a story while reality is unfolding right in front of them. A simple practice to break free. Pause, take a slow breath, and focus on one thing in the room. The texture of an object, the sound of a distant noise, the feeling of air moving through the lungs. This shifts attention away from thinking and back to awareness. The School for Gods teaches that freedom isn't found in solving mental problems, but in stepping beyond them. The present moment is the only place where a man has true power. But the mind resists stillness. It will do anything to pull a man back into thought, convincing him that thinking is necessary to stay in control. That's the final illusion, because the truth is, real control isn't found in the mind, it's found in surrender. And when a man finally stops chasing control, what happens?